When people told themselves their past with stories, explained their present with stories, foretold the future with stories, the best place by the fire was kept for the storyteller.
John Bosco, who was born in the year 1815, passed his earliest years in the happy liberty of the fields of Becchi, a small village in Piedmont, Italy. As a little shepherd boy, he would play with his young companions, drawing them away from evil and leading them on to virtue. In 1823, he wanted to go to school in the town of Castelnuovo, a few miles away. But his ignorant 20-year-old stepbrother prevented him, because he wanted hands to work in the fields and vineyard. But during the winter of 1824 to 1825, when in Piedmont there is no work in the snowy fields, John Bosco's mother sent him to school in a nearby village. There a priest of great piety taught him to read and write, and above all taught him his catechism, and prepared him for his first confession. Under the guidance of this priest, the young John Bosco learned the means necessary for preserving God's grace in the soul by prayer and mortification. Once able to read, John would often be seen with a book in hand, even while watching the animals in their pasture. On one occasion, some other shepherd boys wanted John to join their games, but he refused and they beat him. He might have paid them back. But forgiveness was his revenge. He told them, "I cannot play because I must study. I want to become a priest." After that, they left him in peace. Admiring his patience and meekness, they became his friends, and so John Bosco would instruct them in catechism and teach them to sing hymns to our Blessed Mother. Then, when John was 9 years old, he had a dream which revealed to him his future vast and providential mission for boys during his laborious life. He himself narrates the dream in his Memoirs of the Oratory. John wrote his Memoirs of the Oratory of St. Francis de Sales after an explicit order from the Holy Father. He now narrates the following dream. "When I was about 9 years old, I had a dream that left a profound impression on me for the rest of my life. I dreamed that I was near my home, in a very large playing field where a crowd of children were having fun. Some were laughing, others were playing, and not a few were cursing. I was so shocked at their language that I jumped into their midst, swinging wildly and shouting at them to stop. At that moment a man appeared, nobly attired, with a manly and imposing bearing. He was clad with a white flowing mantle, and his face radiated such light that I could not look directly at him. He called me by name and told me to place myself as leader of those boys, adding these words: 'You will have to win these friends of yours not with blows but with gentleness and kindness. So begin right now to show them that sin is ugly and virtue beautiful.' Confused and afraid, I replied that I was only a boy and unable to talk to these youngsters about religion. At that moment the fighting, shouting and cursing stopped, and the crowd of boys gathered around the man who was talking. Almost unconsciously I asked, 'But how can you order me to do something that looks so impossible? What seems so impossible you must achieve by being obedient, and by acquiring knowledge. But where? How? I will give you a teacher under whose guidance you will learn, and without whose help all knowledge becomes foolishness.' 'But who are you?' 'I am the son of her whom your mother has taught you to greet 3 times a day. My mother told me not to talk to people I don't know, unless she gives me permission. So please, tell me your name.' The man replied, 'Ask my mother.' At that moment I saw beside him a lady of majestic appearance, wearing a beautiful mantle, glowing as if bedecked with stars. She saw my confusion mount, so she beckoned me to her. Taking my hand with great kindness, she said, 'Look.' I did so. All the children had vanished. In their place I saw many animals. There were goats, dogs, cats, bears and a variety of others. This is your field. This is where you must work, the lady told me. Make yourself humble, steadfast and strong. And what you will see happen to these animals you will have to do for my children. I looked again. The wild animals had turned into as many lambs. Gentle, gambling lambs. Bleating a welcome for that man and lady. At this point of my dream, I started to cry, and I begged the lady to explain what it all meant because I was so utterly confused. She then placed her hand on my head and said, "In due time everything will be clear to you." After she had spoken these words, some noise awakened me. Everything had vanished. I was completely bewildered. Somehow my hands still ached and my cheeks still stung because of all the fighting. Moreover, my conversation with that man and lady so disturbed my mind that I was unable to sleep any longer that night. In the morning I could barely wait to tell my dream. When my brothers hear it, they burst out laughing. I then told my mother and grandmother. Each one who heard it gave it a different interpretation. My brother Joseph said, "You're to become a shepherd and take care of goats, sheep and livestock." My mother's comment was, "Who knows? Maybe you will become a priest." Dryly, Anthony muttered, "You might become the leader of a gang of robbers." But my very religious, illiterate grandmother had the last word. "You mustn't pay attention to dreams." I felt the same way about it, yet I could never get that dream out of my head. What I am about to relate may give some new insight into it. I never brought up the matter and my relatives gave no importance to it. But in 1858, when I went to Rome to confer with the Pope about the Salesian congregation, Pope Pius IX asked me to tell him everything that might have even the slightest bearing on the supernatural. Then, for the first time, I told him the dream that I had had when I was 9. The Pope ordered me to write it in detail for the encouragement of the members of the congregation, for whose sake I had gone to Rome. This dream came back to John Bosco over and over again for a period of 18 years, but with each repetition there were always many new additions. With each new vista, he was able to envision more clearly not only the establishment of his oratory and the spread of his work, but also the obstacles that were to arise, the stratagems of his enemies and the way to overcome them. Over the next several weeks, dear listener, I will be telling the story of the 40 dreams of Saint John Bosco. Be attentive.